It ended just a few months into the pandemic. Alan Janae tracking the contract talks tonight. Alan, many shoppers have decided not to cross those picket lines.
Well, at this point in the strike, Jim, a lot of people have either had to make a trip to the grocery store or soon will, and that means making that decision whether to cross the picket lines or not. King Soopers is not sharing with us the amount of money they may be losing due to the strike, but we do know that grocery stores make their profits on a volume business, and these strike stores are certainly a lot less busy. The day started with a fiery message from Denver's mayor at Martin Luther King Day celebrations, asking people not to cross picket lines and to thank workers for their efforts during the pandemic.
Because if he was here at 93 and able-bodied, Dr. King will be in that picket line today, saying we're here to honor you. You matter and you're worthy.
And at 14th and Cremeria in Denver, where a King Soopers and Safeway sit on opposite sides of the street, one was quiet and the parking lot nearly empty, the other busy and full.
It's really busy, yeah.
Tim Bauer parked across the street at King Soopers to go to Safeway.
It's a mob over there.
Murray Devaney was in the King Soopers lot as well.
The Folgers French roast that my neighbor wanted that I could not get at Safeway.
He supported workers, but shopping for himself and an elderly neighbor crossed picket lines to get what he needed.
Parked, went back to the Safeway, and they didn't have the items. Came back and did my shopping in King Soopers, and a couple of the picketers said, "Oh, don't go in here." I said, "Sorry."
Teresa Venters once worked for King Soopers and was shopping at Safeway, knowing they'll soon have a contract up too.
First that one, then theirs is coming up.
What will you do then?
And go back, I guess, once they settle.
Now, Target and Walmart stores are said to be busier with grocery shoppers as well. Not all grocery stores, though, are getting busier. I checked with the Tony's today, and the manager there told me that they hadn't really seen much of a significant increase, but they are at a different price point. Now, King Soopers says in a statement that they are pleased that all of its strike stores remain open, and that there are those, they point out, that still are not dealing with strikes. Those in Monument as well as Castle Rock and those north of 120th, where not all workers or no workers are union. In Denver, I'm Alan Janae covering Colorado First.
Today, thousands marched in the annual parade in downtown Denver to honor the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. This was the view from Copter 4, that big crowd this morning. The celebration was back in person after being canceled last year due to COVID. Denver's parade has grown into one of the largest MLK events in the entire country. And this year, it came with a call for marchers to register to vote. While there is legislation at our nation's capital aimed at protecting those voting rights, its passage in the Senate is in doubt. Pamela McGinnis tells us she once marched with Dr. King years ago, and she's afraid the rights he and so many fought for could be taken away. Mayor Michael Hancock agrees.
Really, I'm most afraid about right now to see this kind of thing. We need to have it because we're getting ready to lose our voting rights, and we're getting ready to go back to where he fought for this.
Stop playing games with our right to the ballot box and our right to vote in this nation.
Pamela did tell us she is still hopeful about the path ahead and encouraged by the excitement of today's march. Congress is expected to debate that voting rights bill tomorrow. And in Aurora, people were answering Dr. King's call to help others. Several groups teamed up for the annual event at the MLK Library on Colfax. They put together some 1,500 meals to be distributed to the less fortunate. Organizers tell us Dr. King was a man of service, and this was a perfect way to honor that legacy.
We're talking about his vision of us standing arm in arm, working together and making sure that we all doing our part to uplift those who've been downtrodden, those who've been disenfranchised, and those who've been discriminated against.
Today's goal was making 300 more meals than last year, and these volunteers sure seem determined to make that happen. Well, tonight, the National Western Stock Show is hosting the MLK African American Heritage Rodeo, part of the Bill Pickett Rodeo, celebrating black cowboys and cowgirls with the best young athletes competing. Our Karen Morfitt having some fun over at the Coliseum tonight. And Karen, you met a local competitor who says tonight really is special.
right, Jim? Being able to compete in such a large rodeo like the one here at National Western Stock Show is one thing, but she says being an African-American barrel racer and roper and competing on a day with so much meaning, she says that makes this event really stand out. In 4.8 seconds, 15-year-old Sadie Jackson is out of the chutes and rope out.
Good girl.
But getting to the competition has taken Jackson years.
It is a big adrenaline rush, but I try not to get nervous because your horse can definitely feel the nerves that you have.
The last time she competed here, she walked away with what's now her favorite buckle.
I ended up winning it for the women's barrel racing.
And while she certainly has made a name for herself, she's looking to do more with her success.
Let our rejoicings. I do want to inspire other African American boys and girls because sometimes they think that they're not good enough or they're not able to do it because they are African American, but they are.
Her parents, Stephanie and Kendry Jackson, say they're proud of her hard work, but her mission is an inspiration.
It's great for little kids to see somebody that looks like them doing stuff that's not common or not shown as being common. To see that, I think as a little kid, gives them like, hey, I could do that.
Competing on a day devoted to Martin Luther King Jr. and his work is motivation for Sadie in and out of the arena.
It is important because it is MLK Day and he's done so many good things and he stood up for what was right, and now as an African American I'm able to participate in things like this.
Now that 4.8 seconds was enough to put Jackson into the #1 spot for the roping competition. As far as the barrel racing goes, her horse just wouldn't cooperate tonight, so she didn't get to compete in the barrel racing event. But guys, she will likely be back again competing next year. Back to you.
A survivor of sexual abuse files a lawsuit against her alleged attacker decades later.
It was very painful and put me into a deep depression.
Coming up, the new law that brings her closer to justice after enduring abuse as a child, and why a push to convince skiers to cancel their Epic passes is starting to snowball.
Clouds are increasing tonight from the west. I have your first alert to a weather system in California. It'll be here Wednesday, and it will open the door to Canada. We'll explain in your forecast.
And the Avs won their game today but lost a key player in the process, the latest on Darcy Kemper's injury. Plus, the latest on the Broncos' search for a head coach and why they won't be the only ones trying to woo Dan Quinn.
We are continuing to cover Colorado First for you tonight as a woman has filed a civil case against a former teacher she says sexually abused her decades ago. It is the first civil case filed under a new Colorado law that allows such cases to be pursued no matter how much time has passed. CBS 4 investigator Rick Salinger talked to one woman who wanted her story told.
It was a long time ago, 1977. Before and during a river rafting trip in which a teenage girl says she was sexually assaulted by a private school teacher.
I immediately buried it. It was too overwhelming for me to handle at my age, and I didn't tell anyone except a Catholic priest who I confessed it to.
Kate McPhee was 15 years old back then. Now, decades later, she has filed a lawsuit against that teacher. We have not been able to reach him and are not naming him now. She claims she suffered a pattern of sexual misconduct involving alcohol, drugs, and naked massages. Recalling the incident, she says, has been difficult.
It became very painful for me because it was like finding an abscess that had been buried for almost 40 years. And once I started digging into it, it was very painful and put me into a deep depression.
Yes, we can, and yes, we did.
The Child Sexual Abuse Accountability Act was passed by the state last year. It lifts a statute of limitations. Attorney James Avery is representing McPhee and other women.
They've had decades of suffering that they can prove, and the impact in their life is very demonstrable. But unfortunately, the jury's hands are going to be tied when it comes to awarding damages.
It is too late for any criminal charges for this case, but if the law stands, McPhee will get her day in court. Colorado has been among the latter states to pass such a law. It caps the damages at $500,000. Rick Salinger, covering Colorado First.
6 years ago, Colorado eliminated the statute of limitations for criminal cases involving sexual assaults involving children. The man in the social media post, David Lesh, has now been sentenced to a $10,000 fine and 160 hours of community service for his crimes on federal land, specifically using those lands to benefit his outdoor clothing business. Lesh plans to appeal the sentence. Tens of thousands of people have signed a petition calling on Vail Resorts to pay its employees better and to deliver the product pass holders say they expect. Vail Resorts owns the Epic Ski Pass, which includes several areas in Colorado and all over the country. A skier in Washington State started the petition drive and is now calling on skiers to cancel their Epic Pass auto renewals for next season. The petition points out hundreds of unfilled jobs hurting the ski experience at many resorts and low wages for those who are working. The petition also expresses concern over terrain and lifts being closed and a lack of parking. We have reached out to Vail Resorts, but have not heard back.